Well, before I get into the timelines, I thought what I'd do here is show a little piece of one of the bigger visual effects set pieces. It's from the second film. It's when the dwarves are being attacked by some orcs. So I'll just show you, this is how it started out. We worked the scene up in previs. These shots were all done by previs animators, and occasionally where we didn't have a shot, we would just type some text on screen. So this was, and when we have previs like this, it's not just the individual shots that are getting animated, it's coverage for the whole scene, and then we cut it like a live action film. We choose the bits we want. Anyway, so this was the first pass of this scene, and then what happened is Peter and I went through it before the shoot and decided which shots we could do as live action, which shots would have to be entirely CG, and a few other possibilities. So as you see, this one we decided would be a computer-generated shot. So we put that on there, as is that one. Then the studio means we were going to shoot it in a studio, in this as opposed to on location. So these are shots we thought we could do live action on the studio. Wet means it's on the wet set, which was also in a studio, but we built a part of a river and actually put the actors in barrels and floated them through a real river. So where it says wet, that means we're going to shoot it on the wet set. Studio means it's really on the dry set. So we went through the whole scene, which is a 7-minute long scene, and we decided how to shoot every shot. And so then we would cut the scene with the live action, where we have it. One thing I'll show you there is you can see a little jump cut there. That would have been, in the actual film, we would have morphed, that jump cut wouldn't have been seen because we'd put a CG orc over the top of it just to hide it. So that's how it looks when we first cut the scene, and then when the visual effects come back, it looks like this. But it's all a matter of planning how to do each shot, so it becomes quite a careful process. And what I will show you now is how our reels looked. I don't actually have the footage for these because this is a complete 20-minute reel from the film. This is reel 7. This is the first iteration of the reel. We start off by cutting each scene individually. Then at a certain point when we have enough of them cut, we join them together into sequences and into reels. And so this is how reel 7 looked when we first put all the scenes and joined them all together. You can see we've got a lot of temporary music there, which is the green clips. Then what we would do with that is we would send that off to the sound department, who would give us a temporary mix. And the soundtracks you can see here, we have yellow for dialogue, blue for sync sound effects, light blue or cyan for atmospheres, and then the green tracks are music again. So we're continually round-tripping things with the sound department. It's not sort of a linear, straightforward process. We send them temporary cuts, they send them back to us, but we have to keep cutting. So even though they have sent us this lovely sound mix, what we do with our normal production audio tracks is we move those down to A11 to A20. We sort of limit ourselves to 10 tracks at any one time. And then if we start recutting the scene, it starts to look like this, where you can see sections of the temporary sound mix intercut with some production audio and Avid mixed music. So it becomes, and then once we've got that, we send it back to them. They send us another temporary mix. And then at the very end, this is how the reel looked on the day we finished. So we get a lovely sound mix back again. It's now the finished one. You notice we've lost the cyan tracks because we no longer need them split out because we're not changing things anymore. As I mentioned yesterday, on V7, the blue clips, those are finished visual effects shots. So we're continually working till we get a whole track of blue. The yellow ones underneath, those are work-in-progress visual effects shots. We often keep a few versions in case we need to go back or change something. On the very bottom is the rushes from set. And then the purple shots are something we call cutbacks. What we will do is, when we come to hand over a visual effects shot, we extend out some handles, and then we mix it down in the Avid, so we get a piece of footage that is just the length of what the visual effects shot is going to be when it comes back from wet to digital. And we cut those into the timeline. The reason we do that is so that I can't make a mistake and extend the... If I don't have that there before there's any visual effects shot returned to me, I might go and extend a shot beyond what has been handed over, and then the shot comes back and it doesn't fit. So by mixing down a clip that's exactly the same length as what we've handed over, I've got a bit of protection there. That doesn't mean we don't extend shots. It just means that I see that we have to re-hand it over if that's happened. What I might do now is hand over briefly to Dan, who might talk to us about how we handled the technical challenge of 48 frames.
Yeah, so everything was shot at 48 frames per second. And one of the issues we had is that we didn't have a 48 frames project to work with. So we worked essentially at half the frames. So of all the frames that we had, we then split them, and this is the time code that was on it. So this is the way the cameras recorded it, with essentially a full stop rather than a colon in between the time code figures for one frame, and then colons in the next frame that was which we essentially assigned as an A frame and a B frame. This pretty much works the same as working interlaced. So we're pretty much doing it the same way. What would happen is that we would then get just the A-frames delivered to us. Yep. Everything would work based on the A-frame, and EDLs, AAFs, everything delivered at that 23976. Yeah. And that would...
That's right, because the film was shot at 48 frames a second, but we just edited it 24 frames, just bringing in every other frame, and that way we could work in a normal project and have half the storage. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is an example of one of the cutbacks that Jabez was talking about earlier. Of course, the problem being is that visual effects were working at 48 frames a second, so we had to be able to deliver them frame counts at 48 frames. So if you'll notice here, as I jog through, the counter at the top right, which is the frames as they're going in count sheets to visual effects, are all just incrementing by 2. And essentially, we always worked with the odd frame coming back from visual effects. Yeah. There's a shot coming back from visual effects, and once again, they're just delivering the odd frame.
What I'll do now is show you something which I hope is fairly interesting. Towards the end of working on the third film, we came to a point where the visual effects house, Weta Digital, was very busy and sort of had their plate full. And so one thing that Peter was open to, in order to get a few more shots finished in time, was to try and design them in the Avid and then have them just replicated in the digital intermediate, sort of like in the online. So there was a sequence where Sauron appears, and I'll play a section of it here. I'm going to skip forward. The shots I want to talk about are these individual close-ups of Sauron, which fill the screen, and they're sort of POV shots, and they don't involve anyone else, and they get a bit psychedelic and everything. In order to avoid Weta Digital having to do totally new shots for these, when they were very busy anyway with the rest of the film, what we did is we experimented in the Media Composer, and I took shots from other films, of the Hobbit films, that had appeared in the second film, maybe even one from the first film, I can't remember. And then I combined them in ways like I reversed them, I sped them up, I changed the size, we did a lot of inverting. As you can see from the timeline here, this is actually how it was done. So there's a lot, there's a sped up shot or half. This is all just done in the Media Composer, a whole lot of flash frame editing and things with inversed elements. See, there's the inverse of that. So it's just a big experiment, really. A lot of flash frame cuts. So I just did a big, long chunk of Sauron using elements I could find, trying to make them look different, because they played very differently in the films that they were in originally. So I just did every crazy thing I could think of to them, mixed it down, and then we edited with that. And if you can see here in the actual scene from the movie, these shots are just video mix-downs from that, what I called the Sauron Eye experiment. And I just cut those in, and then said to Dan, get this online, and we put it in the movie. So we saved a bit of time by using that sort of trick. In fact, here we got a bit more of that. This is a scene from the second film. Actually, this is from the extended edition, a piece where the whole company has become into a drug-induced state by walking through Mirkwood Forest, and they're starting to hallucinate. In that case, that's a delay on the same shot and creating a bit of a ghost effect. But because we'd had so many takes shot, we would, if you look at the Sauron one, we actually used other takes for the ghost effect. Like, we would dissolve from one performance take into another, just to give it a bit of a creepy feel. So these are all sorts of things that were quite fun to experiment with in the timeline. Here's that's going across 2 takes there. And there were sort of simple things that you could play with in the Media Composer, but create quite interesting effects. The other thing we do when the characters would speak lines, we would echo those lines by using other performance takes, so the echo has a different feel to it. And do you have more you can? Yeah. Okay. I'll hand back to Dan.
So one of the issues we had with the complexity of the project and the size of it was that we wanted to retain as much as we could in the Avid for moving on to other departments, and as well as shooting in 48 and shooting in 3D. So one of the things here, and if you just look at the Media Composer UI, we inserted a lot of metadata into the clips as they came in. These included things like the other eye, what the clip name of the other eye was, which unit it was shot with, down to what day the rig that was shot on, the type of rig it was, what codec it was recorded at, even the name, Henry and George, of the 2 cameras there, along with everything from on set, including the script notes, take notes or notes from the director, stereo notes of any issues that there were with the stereo, and grade notes. And all of this was then available to the VFX vendors and anybody else that needed it. And we didn't have to delve through the volumes of paperwork that...
I don't think I've seen half of that before. I mean, that was the challenge of the project, really, was the amount of footage there was. Oops, sorry. Let me play this down. Here's a little thing we prepared just to demonstrate how much footage was available. This is the barrel chase scene. It starts with previs. We shot a lot in actual rivers with empty barrels that then we composited dwarfs into. We did aerial footage, flyovers, where we had to, without any barrels. We even did some GoPro material just for fun. A lot of pre-visualized shots, then a lot of mocap captured on the stage. Green screen shoot, which was all dry without any water. And then the wet set I was talking about before, we actually built a river and floated the dwarfs down it. So, as you can see, there was a lot of material, it all becomes a 7-minute sequence. And it's that's where we rely on the Media Composer, is for the ability to organize that amount of material and find your way through it and actually know where things are. And otherwise, if you lose stuff, you don't get as many creative opportunities. I mean, I was on set for the entire 18-month shoot. I had various Avids I could set up actually on the soundstage beside Peter and work with him. So when you're shooting a film, you often get downtime, at least for the director, you know, between setups and things. So whenever that happened, I would grab Peter and get him to look at material. Often we would select takes that way, just sitting there on set. And after he had, you know, selected his takes, I would do a first cut. But then Peter and I would cut the scene again fresh, which might be months later, and then we would often compare our new cut against my original one. And, you know, if I was lucky, we would combine the two or something. It's, you know, it was a 5-year project, 18-month shoot, followed by a year of post for each film. When we were on the set, we were always able to plug into the Unity and access any of the material straight away, even though the cutting rooms were quite some distance from the sound stages. We did go on a 3-month location shoot where I had to take a laptop Avid and just a bunch of hard drives, but that allowed me to take the film with me and set up the Avid on a mountainside or beside a lake and just keep cutting.